Salve Discipuli. All right, we've got 4.29 and 4.30 to get through today of Julius Caesar. This is obviously a very special broadcast because I am recording this in the Latin room. I'm sure you would have noticed without me telling you, but there it is anyway. Okay, so Caesar is in Britain after fighting an initial battle, and he's going to run into more trouble. So here we go. On the same night, it happened that there was a full moon, which day, meaning during the daytime of a full moon day, which day was accustomed to bring about the greatest seaside tides in the ocean. Okay, so that means there are going to be some pretty serious tide rolling in, pretty serious waves. The water is going to be very difficult to handle. And that had been unknown, or that was unknown, to our guys. So Caesar's point here is that they did not know about the fact that the tide would be so troublesome on a day of a full moon. Note, he says, like, unknown to our guys, not just like unknown to me, Caesar. He goes on. Thus, at one time, both. So we've got to say. So we actually get our main verb down here and our nominative here. So thus, at one time, the tide, by which we mean like the waves, had filled up the long ships, both the long ships, by means of which he had sort of planned, or he had, I'm trying to think what word they give you for this, taken care of or provided for. By means of which he had provided for the army to be transported, meaning the ships that he expected the army, the infantry, to be transported on, and which Caesar had led up onto dry land. So he had done a responsible thing, right? Caesar had dragged these ships up onto dry land, which should keep them safe, but the tide had filled them up all the same because it was so high. Okay? And the cargo ships, which, and I'm sorry, let me back up. And the storm afflicted the cargo ships, which had been tied up at anchors. Okay, so basically you've got the tide, you've got the storm, all right, and the tide's getting the long ships, which were already dragged up onto land, which suggests that Caesar was doing the responsible thing, and then the storm afflicts the cargo ships, which had been tied at anchor. And not any ability either of helping or maybe managing or of helping was given to our guys. In other words, there's nothing that our guys could do to prevent this. Okay, so consider the picture this paints of Caesar and his guys. Are they being responsible? Have they done everything they possibly could? With very many, or with several ships having been broken, since the remaining were useless for the purpose of navigating, with ropes, anchors, and the remaining equipment having been lost, a great disturbance happened, or I'm sorry, a great disturbance of the entire army happened, a thing which, all right, that which was necessary to happen. Okay, so consider what Caesar is saying here. What's his point? Several of the ships are broken. All right, the rest of them are missing things that are critical for sailing, like ropes and anchors and other equipment. So when that happens, basically these guys are stranded on Britain. And Caesar says a great, and then he interrupts before he even gets to perturbatio. He says that thing which was necessary to happen, disturbance of the entire army, occurred. So consider again, is Caesar at fault? Is anyone at fault here? Four, there were no other ships. There were not other ships by which they were able to be carried back, and all things were lacking, which were for a use, this is a dative, for or towards or for the purpose of remaking ships. So they don't have the equipment they need to repair ships. And because it was established by all, or it was, what's a good way? They say it is evident. Because it was evident to all it was evident to all that it was right to be wintered in Gaul. In other words, everybody there was hoping to get back on ships, get back to Gaul, back to the continent, and spend the winter there, as opposed to getting stuck in Britain. So the fact that their ships are broken and they don't have the ability to repair them is bad news. And because they planned to winter back in Gaul, grain had not been provided in these places into the winter. So Caesar, expecting to go back to Gaul, didn't bother to bring a sufficient amount of grain with him to Britain. All right, this sounds like a pretty significant setback here. All right, again, we want to ask ourselves, has somebody messed up? Has Caesar failed? How does he portray it? Okay, and we jump to 4.30, which is a bit shorter. Theoretically, there we go. All right. And here's what's called a connective relative. So this quibus, the antecedent, is all the stuff we just basically talked about. So you can treat this like an and these. And with these matters having been recognized or understood, the chiefs of Britain who had come together after the battle to Caesar, and they had done that. They had all come together to Caesar because they had to make terms. All right, they were basically, sort of surrendering to Caesar, and then, of course, they granted hostages, blah, blah, blah. So those leaders of Britain, having spoken among each other, all right, between themselves, when or since they understood that the cavalry and the ships and the grain, that's a heck of a lot of conjunctions, by the way. The cavalry and the ships and the grain were lacking to the Romans. And they recognized the scarcity of soldiers from the smallness of the camp. I want you guys to explain to me what is going on here. What does he mean by the scarcity of the soldiers from the smallness of the camp? What is happening here? The camp, which was even more narrow because of this, the fact that Caesar had transported the legions without baggage. In other words, without certain provisions. So because of all of that, the leaders of Britain considered it was best to do, or maybe considered it best to be done, with a rebellion having been made. Interesting choice of words here, right? Caesar calls this a rebellion. To prohibit, this is the thing they consider it best to do, to prohibit our guys from grain and from forage, and to drag forth the matter into the winter. So I'm going to ask you guys to explain to me what the plan is, what the idea is of the Britons here. What are they thinking? Because with these men having been overcome, the these here is obviously Caesar and his men, or with these men having been blocked off from a return, they were confident, or they believed, this would be the Britons, the leaders, the Principes, they believed that no one would cross over. Here's an indirect statement, accusative, then infinitive. They believed that no one would cross over into Britain afterwards for the sake of waging war, causa plus a genitive. Okay? So since they figured that if we conquer them, we keep them off from prevent them from returning to Gaul, nobody in the future would cross over into Britain in order to wage war. Okay? They saw this as an opportunity to make a serious statement, and that is, if you cross into Britain, bad things happen. And so, again, with the conspiracy having been made, we're definitely going to want to consider this choice of words. A conspiracy? With the conspiracy having been made, little by little, they began to depart from the camp. So remember, these guys were in the Roman camp. And so little by little, they're seeping away, a few at a time. And they began to lead down their own peeps from the fields in secret. Recall that they had sent their men back to the fields. Now they're bringing them from the fields back together to put together an army. Okay, there you go. Hopefully you're prepared tomorrow to discuss some of the questions I've brought up here. The bottom line is, always remember that we only have Caesar's point of view of this. We don't get to see what the Britons had to say, the Gauls, etc. Okay, while later.